Good evening, everybody. Hello and welcome to tonight's Let's Talk Teenagers session, which is part of the Let's Talk project, which aims to empower us all as parents and carers by raising awareness of community safety risks and challenges that are faced by our young people. And our new Let's Talk website has been launched, and we'd encourage you to share that far and wide, and the QR code is on the screen for you now. It's great to see you here this evening. Thank you so much for giving up an hour and a half of your free time this evening to come along, and we're sure that you'll find tonight's content helpful. I'm Emma Stevens from the Safety and Resilience Consultancy, and with my colleague Chloe Pope, we're going to be facilitating tonight's session. And our Safety and Resilience Consultancy is a partnership that was set up to support you with the challenges of looking after your children and young people in this ever-changing landscape. So with this amount of you, actually there aren't as many as we were expecting tonight. We are a smaller group, but it is great to see 34 of you here. We had over 200 sign up, so we may get a few more joining us as we go along. But even with 30 or 40 of us on this platform, it can make the IT a little bit temperamental. So you'll see that your cameras are off and your microphones are muted, but this does mean that unfortunately Chloe and I can't respond to any raised hands during tonight's session. But the chat bar is open, so please do put any comments or questions in the chat bar. This is a great way for you to support each other. You know, if you've used a service or you've got some tools that worked for you, please do share this information. However, we all know that every family is different. So because something worked for you doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. And we're very aware that services are sometimes very stretched and that you might not always have had the response and support that you needed. However, please do try to keep things positive tonight in the chat. We want it to be a safe and caring space for you to support each other. There may be times when it's difficult for Chloe and I to talk during the session and give appropriate answers. There may be a question in the chat that needs a little more thought rather than a quick public reply. And if that's the case, please be assured we won't be ignoring you. We will respond back to you by email. Please be respectful of each other, and for confidentiality reasons, please don't give any names or identifying features of your children or young people. The session tonight is going to be recorded, but your names and comments won't be visible to anybody who watches the recording back. We've run these sessions a few times now, and we've taken on board any feedback that's been given, and we have changed the sessions slightly to keep up to date with everything. So if you've attended before, there may be a few new things to hear, or maybe you've just come along again as a reminder. And if that's the case, it's really great to have you back again. And there will be a QR session at the end of tonight for you to leave any feedback that you might have, because we really want to get these sessions right. And just one very last housekeeping comment. We really encourage you to share what you hear over the next few weeks with your young people, but a lot of the content you might want to think about before you share with them. So tonight is for parents and carers. It's not really suitable for your teenagers to listen to. So sit somewhere quiet where they can't hear, or pop some headphones in. And finally, some of the content we're going to share tonight might be difficult for you to hear, but we can't apologise for that, because it's really important that you know what your children and young people are facing out in the world. But one positive of being at home and listening remotely on your sofas is that if we talk about a subject that's going to be difficult for you, you can mute us, you can take a break, and when you come back, we'll have moved on. So it's a great way of looking after yourselves. These sessions are not at all about telling you how to be a perfect parent. That person doesn't actually exist. We're here to try and make you aware of some of the risks and issues that you might come up against. For example, as professionals, Chloe and I go on lots of training and lots of awareness events, but we're always very aware that the people who support children the most, the people that are with them the most, you as parents and carers, are often not given the same amount of information that we are. Being responsible for teenage humans is really hard work, and to do a good job of this, we really need you to look after yourselves. So tonight's agenda is we are going to be talking about a few things tonight. We're going to be looking firstly at the basics of our teenager's brain and the development. And what goes along with that is those social and emotional changes. We're going to be looking at healthy and unhealthy relationships and how we all feel about body image. We're going to look a little bit at the tough subject of toxic masculinity, and we're going to look at how that can be shaped by family life. Week 2 next week is a slightly tougher week. We're looking at community risks, including county lines, gang crime, social media, and safety planning. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those risky, unhealthy relationships that teenagers can sometimes find themselves in. And then finally, in week 3, we're going to be looking at our family strengthening. So, how to actually have those difficult conversations, the importance of role modeling, and our teenagers' emotional well-being. So we all know, don't we, that parenting is the hardest job we're ever going to do, and that parenting teenagers is probably the hardest emotional job you will ever do. You know what it's like. You've had an emotional, challenging day with them. It's a complete roller coaster, isn't it? One minute you are the best parent in the world, and literally a few seconds later, you can be the worst parent in the world, and you've ruined someone's whole life, apparently. So what we want to help you do is just address some of the common themes and stresses. And each week we're going to look at what those challenges might be and then what might help. So no magic wands, we're just helping you to understand what's going on in your teenager's world. And again, don't forget, every family is totally unique, and what works for one person might not work for you. Teenagers do not fit into neat little boxes. So firstly tonight, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the biological changes that are taking place during puberty. These are the things that our teenagers really do have no control over. But what we can do as parents and carers is change our responses to some of these biological events. And then Chloe's going to take over for a little bit, and she's going to talk to you about some of the pressures of society that all of our young people are facing. So let's have a quick route around your teenager's head. What's happening in there right now? Well, their brains reach the biggest size in early adolescence. So there's a lot of very quick growth happening. I think maybe some of us have suggested at some point in our lives that we think females mature quicker than males. But there is actually some scientific proof that that's true. However, it's not long before boys catch up. For our girls, the brain reaches its biggest size at about 11, and for boys, it's around age 14. But brains don't stop finishing, developing, and maturing until mid to late 20s. So these teenage years can last a long while. When we're expecting our 15, 16, 17-year-olds to be making mature adult decisions, often we're asking more of them than they're capable of. They can't always make decisions in that mature and measured way that we'd like them to. And that's mostly because of the front part of their brain. So this bit's called the prefrontal cortex. It's the very last part of the brain to mature. And this area is the one that is responsible for skills like planning, prioritizing, and controlling our impulses. And because these skills are still developing, teenagers are much more likely to engage in risky behaviour without considering the potential results. Their brain is just not able to pull all those actions and link them to the possible consequences. However, that same brain is really poised and ready to adapt and learn. Your teenager's brain has lots of plasticity, which means it can change, adapt, and respond quickly to its environment. But that means we need to challenge it. We need to keep the brains busy, and we need to keep them challenged. It's so important to help their brains mature and to learn. But ongoing changes in the brain, along with all the physical, emotional, and social changes, can make teenagers really vulnerable to mental health problems. All those big changes that the brain is experiencing will explain why adolescence is a time when many mental health issues can emerge. So we're thinking about things like anxiety, depression, and eating disorders. Teenage brains are far more vulnerable to this kind of stress than adult brains. I'm going to talk throughout the next few weeks about what some of these stresses are and what we can do. But a quick one to remember is that with all this brain development going on, teenagers need more sleep than children and adults. It's a fact. Your teenager is not just being lazy lying in bed. Research shows that melatonin, which is basically the sleep hormone, The levels of this in teenagers' blood are naturally higher later at night and they drop later in the morning in teenagers. So that would explain why many of our teenagers stay up late and struggle with getting up in the morning. So teenagers should be getting about 9 to 10 hours of sleep a night, but most of them aren't getting anywhere near that. And a lack of sleep, as we all know, can make it difficult to pay attention, and it increases that risk, doesn't it, for being irritable or for being depressed. So some of this is summed up in a very quick video that we're about to show you. You could, once you've watched it, also share this with your young person as well to help them make a little bit of sense of all of it.
Between childhood and adulthood, our hormones kickstart a phase of significant change. And while the physical changes of adolescence may be obvious, less visible are changes that these hormones trigger in our brains, which might just be responsible for turning our teenage years into a bit of a roller coaster. Throughout our lives, our brains undergo a process called neural pruning. The synapses through which our neurons communicate are either lost or strengthened, depending on how much we use them. Well-used synapses grow strong, while the weaker ones fade away. It's this process that makes us capable of faster, clearer, and more complex thought as we grow up. But, crucially, pruning happens at different rates in different areas of the brain. By the time we're adolescents, the neural networks that communicate emotion, risk and reward are well developed, while others, which may help us to plan, prioritise, think logically and moderate our social behaviour, are yet to mature. So, a potential mismatch between our emotion and our judgment arises just as our emotional and social worlds are becoming more complex, making an increase in social anxiety quite normal at this time. Researchers at the University of Oxford want to know how this might affect our behaviour as we progress through our teenage years. In a recent study, they focused on the social worries many of us feel as adolescents. When presented with photographs of ambiguous social scenes and asked to imagine themselves in the picture, anxious younger teens were more likely than others to perceive negativity. But while these heightened emotions and the struggle to control them can make adolescence a difficult time for some, it's also a golden time for learning and growth. The adolescent brain is particularly agile and flexible, and as such, it's especially open to new opportunities, new technologies, and new experiences. So while our teenage years may feel pretty weird, they're also pretty wonderful. To explore how your brain develops, visit www.oxfordsparks.ox.ac.uk and tell us what you think on our Facebook and Twitter.
I love the way that just explains really simply some of the changes that are going on in our teenagers' brain. So how does this affect day-to-day life for us all in families, and what does it look like? So what we're going to see is our young people seeking more independence. So this is likely to influence the decision that your child makes and the relationships that your child has with family and friends. So they want to start doing things on their own, even when it's a bit scary or you feel that they're not yet capable. So sometimes it's not okay for you to walk with them anywhere or be seen dropping them off or picking them up. They might still want you to, but they're also looking for ways to try and survive without you. So unless the consequences are unsafe, we would suggest you let them try, but be there to pick them up if they fall. We all learn, don't we, by experiences. So just telling your teenager that something won't work. Maybe find a compromise, meet them halfway through their journey. It also helps them not to have to lose face or to back down when they realise that actually walking home late, say at night, is scary, or consider getting them to check in with you at certain points on that journey. They're just testing the water at this point and trying things out with you. Because the nature of teenage brain development means that teenagers are likely to seek out new experiences and they'll engage in more risk-taking behaviour. So they're more likely than you to engage in dangerous driving, hence the huge insurance cost. They're more likely to binge drink, use drugs, and take risky sexual behaviours. Sometimes they can see the risk, but as they are still developing control over those impulses, they're sometimes likely to make the wrong or unsafe decisions. And teenagers are also more likely to focus on their peer group in decision-making situations. So there are moments when they really do care more about what their friends think of them than what you think of them. Suddenly their life is boring. We never do anything, and they're looking for excitement. They're looking for something, aren't they, to post on their Insta page. And social media really today now plays a massive part in this. Everyone else's life is way more exciting than theirs, and the number of likes from a post is a way that teenagers validate some of their risky decisions. They're looking for peer acceptance because they're searching for identity. They're busy working out who they are and where they fit in this world. And until now, this has generally been shaped by you. And now that search is widened, isn't it? It's influenced by gender, by peer groups, by cultural backgrounds, media, school, and also still by your family's expectations. And that's a lot to work through before you feel confident in who you are. Most of us evolve throughout our life, but not as much as we do in the teenage years. And it takes a lot of energy and brain capacity to work through all of this, hence needing more sleep. And then we come to sex. So their hormones are really now kicking in. And these hormones will affect teenagers' moods, emotions, and impulses, as well as their bodies. The mood swings that they're experiencing are caused by fluctuations in estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all those sex hormones. And these same hormones will also affect the way that they think about dating. Our teenagers become way more interested in sex, sometimes to the point of obsession as these hormones kick into gear. And it may be difficult for you to think that your teenager's body and mind are being controlled by the forces of nature instead of being directed by you. So many teenagers feel that the changes they're experiencing are weird, freakish, or unnatural. But in fact, almost everything that your teenagers go through during adolescence is a normal part of their development, and they're going to need your reassurance that everything is okay. They also tend to assume that all of their friends are having sex, even if they're not. So in a minute, Chloe's going to discuss how we talk about keeping them safe in those first relationships when all this starts. But the most important thing that you can do today is make it okay to talk about sex and relationships. Teenagers who feel comfortable talking openly to a parent or another adult about sex are way less likely to go through with something that they might not really want to do. If you can give your children the sense that you're open to anything that they have to say, good or bad, they're much more likely to share what is really going on in their lives with you. Try and encourage honest discussions about sexuality and answer questions as frankly as possible. Every family has their own values and beliefs, and that's okay, obviously, about sexual activity in the teenage years. But the important thing is that these beliefs are communicated clearly and that the opportunity to talk is always there. Try not to react badly or judge them if they tell you something that you don't like. We need to try and remember that once upon a time, we experienced the same feelings and drives that our teenagers do now. Try and think back to your first love or obsession. You may or may not want to share this with your teenager, but try and remember how intense those first feelings were. In week 3, we are going to look in more detail about how to start some of these difficult conversations and keep those channels of communication open. And we've also got some clips later tonight that you can share that are great conversation openers. I know it can be embarrassing, but we really, really need to try and get over that. You may find that your teenager shows really strong feelings and intense emotions now at different times. Moods seem a little bit unpredictable. Those emotional ups and downs can lead to increased conflict in the family home because your child's brain is still learning how to control and express emotions in that grown-up way. So at times they may seem totally oblivious or insensitive to you and your emotions, but they will get better at reading and processing these emotions as they get older. While they're developing these skills, they can sometimes misread facial expressions or body language, and apologising is really difficult for them to do. So now our teenagers are thinking more about right and wrong, and they're going to start developing a stronger individual set of values and morals. They start to learn that they're responsible for their own actions, their own decisions, and therefore the consequences. So they start to question things a bit more. And your words and actions will really shape your child's sense of right or wrong, which means that within your house, there will probably be lots of arguments with you about just about everything. So I could list 1,000 behaviours that are risky to us that our teenagers will not see as dangerous in any way because they don't see risk and danger in the same way that we do. Their brains are just not developed enough to weigh up that risk and make a balanced decision. Of course, they're infallible, aren't they? Nothing can hurt them. And this is fine until something does hurt them and they need a parent. But they or we are not superheroes. You know, things do hurt and they still need you to offload to and be available. So Chloe's now going to talk you through some of the challenges that your young people are facing, and then we'll look at what we can do to help them and help us.
Thank you, Emma, and good evening, everyone. So, relationships. Let's talk about relationships. So, we know, don't we, that as young people progress throughout secondary school, we might find that they start forming relationships. Now, this can be quite an overwhelming experience for us as parents. It's all very new, isn't it? How much do we get involved? How many questions do we ask? Well, it is really important that you ask your young person questions about their relationship, and that's mainly to make sure that that relationship is appropriate but also healthy and safe. But it also really shows that kind of interest in their life and what's going on for them. So, really trying to think about what you absolutely need to know. So, you might need to know how old their partner is, for example, and it might be quite beneficial to kind of figure out how they met. Remember, it's very normal now for young people to meet online, and that's even the case when they're in school. But also remember that meeting online, of course, comes with additional risks. So if your young person has met their boyfriend or their girlfriend online and they're yet to meet face to face, it is, of course, really important that some safety planning goes alongside this. So, firstly, we would always recommend that an adult is present for this first meeting. They may not want you there, of course, they might not, but it's absolutely okay to remind them that you are their parent and so you do set the rules. You could even suggest that they meet somewhere like Costa, but with the caveat that you're also there, but maybe on a separate table, and their boyfriend or girlfriend doesn't need to know about that. This might reduce kind of some of that embarrassment for the young person, but they know that you are there if they need you. And even if they haven't met online, do still try and take this opportunity to meet your young person's love interest and get to know them. You could ask your teenagers questions like, so how do they treat you? What is it that you like best about them? Or what do you like doing with them, for example? Really opening up that conversation from the start is really important in case anything was to go really wrong. They know that you care about them and their relationship and that you're absolutely there to help them. So I want to start this next section by reminding you all as parents that most relationships are healthy, they are safe, and they are supportive. But I will now be spending the next kind of 10 to 15 minutes talking about unhealthy and abusive relationships. So this is a bit of a health warning that if this sounds like it might be a bit of a triggering or upsetting topic for you, please do feel free to pop me on mute, go make yourself a cup of tea, and when you come back, it's likely that we will have moved on to the next topic. So I guess if I said the words to you, domestic abuse, we'd all have a pretty similar idea in our heads or picture in our heads. We might automatically think about physical violence and we might automatically think about adult relationships. But the reality is domestic abuse is so much more than that. Domestic abuse can, of course, happen to anyone of any age, any gender, religion, class, or ethnicity. But tonight we will just be focusing on young people. So, Safe Lives, which are a national domestic abuse charity, collect lots of statistics and data around domestic abuse. And they have found that 25% of girls and 18% of boys aged between 13 and 17 have experienced some form of physical violence from an intimate partner. They also found that 31% of girls have experienced some form of sexual abuse, sexual violence, or sexual harassment within their relationships, which can be anything from using sexually insulting language all the way to rape. So I appreciate these statistics are really quite shocking, and we're probably all sitting here potentially really quite worried about our young person's relationships. But please do try and remember that we're still not talking about the majority of young people here. And according to those statistics, it's still more likely that your child will experience a healthy and loving relationship rather than an unhealthy or abusive relationship. However, it happens. It might not necessarily happen to your young person, but you might notice warning signs in what they tell you about their friend's relationship, for example. We know that domestic abuse is often hidden and there is a huge stigma around it. So really opening up that conversation at home can be really helpful to start kind of breaking down that taboo and helping your young person to engage in these open and honest conversations. So let's make a start with what domestic abuse actually is. So according to a definition, domestic abuse is an incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive, threatening, degrading, or violent behaviour. The power and control wheel, which you can see on your screens now, can really help us to understand this definition further. So these different sections on the wheel help us to understand how someone could gain power and control over another person. This wheel does use gendered language, but this can, of course, be applied to anyone of any gender. So I won't go through all of these with you, but I think it's important to touch on the ones that are most prevalent that we see within young people's relationships that are unhealthy or abusive. So I'm going to start by touching on using intimidation. So this means using like scary behaviour. So behaviour that would leave someone feeling fearful or like they're walking on eggshells or scared to put a foot wrong. So this can be something as simple as the way that that person looks at the other person, to something like damaging that person's property, for example, smashing things, throwing things around, such as at the wall. Also thinking about emotional abuse, so that's potentially the most common type of abuse. So 91% of people who have been in an abusive relationship report there to have been some level of emotional abuse involved within their relationship. So emotional abuse includes things like put downs, name calling, and playing mind games. Emotional abuse is also referred to as psychological abuse and can fall under verbal abuse. And then we have isolation. So isolation is also commonly seen in abusive relationships. In terms of young people's relationships, this will often involve them making the other partner feel bad for seeing friends, for example. However, remember that within teenage relationships, it's very normal for them to want to spend absolutely all their time with their new partner. So isolation is different when there's abuse involved, and that's because there'll be some level of fear involved. So the victim in that relationship would likely feel scared as to what would happen if they didn't spend all of their time with that one particular person. And I also want to talk about using coercion and threats. So coercive control only actually became a crime 11 years ago in 2015. It's obviously something that has always been around, but it involves more of a pattern of behaviours rather than kind of one-off incidents. So the pattern normally results in the abusive behaviours getting worse as time goes on and can leave the victim feeling very trapped. Commonly in young people, we tend to see the threat of suicide, so that if the victim ends that relationship, then the abusive person might threaten to end their own life, which is obviously a huge pressure on that other young person within that relationship. Other behaviours can include threats, and that could be either making those threats or actually carrying them out, such as the threat to share nude pictures or to spread rumours about that young person. So let's watch a short clip now, which you might have seen before. It was on advert on TV quite a few years ago now, but it's a really great one to kind of highlight abusive teenage relationships and just how quickly they can escalate. If you think this might be difficult to watch, please do step away just for a couple of minutes.
So did you win at football then?
Yeah, of course we did.
Well, because you're the best?
Yep.
Yeah, I thought so.
So, do you want a bit of fun before your parents get back?
Doing what?
You know, just a bit of fun.
No, let's just watch this.
Oh, come on. I'll tell everyone you're frigid.
Well, why would you do that?
Well, you basically are being now.
Well, no, not really, because we've already done it.
Yeah, but you said we would tonight. Then you dragged me over here and now you say it's not happening.
Well, let's just watch this, alright? I don't know when my mum's going to be back. No, I don't want
Oi.
to. No, I don't want to.
How about a cuddle?
What always happens at the end of a cuddle?
Well, who's that?
Nicole?
Oh, you and your mates.
What are you doing?
That's your fault, that.
I've only just got this.
Don't talk to me like that. And anyway,
Why are you talking to Nicole? You know I don't like her.
So I'm not even allowed friends now, I'm not.
Go on, you mate.
He's just like, Mummy, you really hate
hate you. You're pathetic.
Leave her alone!
Please, can you just let go of me, alright?
No, what are you doing?
I'll do it.
You're going to have to put some work in to get me ready now. Well, go on then. Show me something.
So a really hard-hitting clip there, only a minute and a half long, and we've seen a number of things happening there. So we obviously saw that pressure to have sex. We saw the threats in the form of threatening to tell other people that she is frigid. We saw that isolation from friends when she said that she had a text from her friend Nicole, and then him talking negatively of Nicole. We saw that intimidation, and that was by throwing her phone. And we saw the physical abuse from the hair pulling, the emotional abuse by the name calling, such as calling her pathetic, all of which link back to that power and control wheel and really highlight how complex abusive relationships can be, often involving a number of different behaviours. So on your screen now, you will see the cycle of abuse. So the cycle of abuse shows the typical pattern that occurs within abusive relationships. So any relationship will normally start off at the honeymoon phase, which is absolutely no different for abusive relationships. So during this stage, everything is really lovely. There might be a lot of gift giving, for example, and lots of positive time spent together. This stage is really exciting, especially for our young people when relationships are absolutely new to them. Generally, in healthy relationships, this phase might fade out slightly, but the relationship will stay at kind of like calm phase. However, in unhealthy or abusive relationships, they will go round to this tension building phase. So victims often describe this phase as if they're like walking on eggshells. They know that an abusive episode is potentially brewing, but they're often not sure as to when this will occur or what in particular will trigger it. This phase can last for minutes, hours, or even days. The victim will often feel hyper aware to the abusive person in this phase and try and manage their behaviour. We then come round to the abusive incident in this phase. We come around to the abusive incident, and in this phase, that abusive incident can be physical, it can be emotional, or it can be sexual. And then the cycle repeats itself and repeats itself. So victims often will report that the abusive person will minimise, they'll deny, or they will blame after an abusive incident has occurred. So they'll do this by saying things like, I hardly touched you, which is minimising. They might refuse to acknowledge that it happened by saying things like, you're making it up, I never did anything wrong. Or they will put the blame on the other person by saying things like, well, if you didn't upset me, I wouldn't have done it. The honeymoon phase in abusive relationships is often quite exaggerated. So again, it's often involving lots of gift giving or outpouring of love. So the cycle of abuse can really help us to understand why young people stay in relationships that aren't healthy. Yes, we have the two phases that are abusive, but we also have this honeymoon and calm phase. So it can be really, really difficult to break this cycle. Of course, it's unlikely that young people are going to want to leave when things are nice and things are calm and the honeymoon phase. But also it's incredibly difficult and can be really quite unsafe to leave in that tension building or abusive phase. So how can we actually know if our young people are in an abusive relationship? Well, we know that everyone and every relationship is different, of course, but some common signs can include things like physical signs. So we're thinking about things like unexplained bruising or red marks. We need to look out for things like them being quite overly defensive of their partner. We can look out for drastic changes in behaviour or mood, such as sudden low mood, anxiety, or even the opposite, such as really exaggerated confidence. We need to look out for things like them being overly secretive, being constantly on their phone, and especially seeming frightened when they're not on their phone. We've said in some of our previous sessions that, of course, what I've just said are often some kind of common and normal behaviours that we see in young people, such as being secretive or constantly being on their phone. So the real key to look out for here is change. Has their behaviour really suddenly changed? And you're seeing quite a few of these signs together, for example. Always trust your gut as their parent in these situations, and remember that you really do know your young person better than anyone else. So at this point in the sessions, it feels like the world is pretty gloomy, but please do remember it is unlikely that your young people are experiencing all of these problems or even any of them. But knowledge really is power here, and it's important that we talk about them because they are stigmatized and they are all hidden. Domestic abuse and sexual harassment or assault all involve people pushing or totally disregarding the boundaries that our young people have. However, how do we really know that our young people fully know what boundaries even are, how to have them, and how to respect other young people's boundaries? So under that category of boundaries falls the major factor of consent. Now, consent is a very, very challenging term to define, especially when we're thinking about sex and relationships. I know that when I think about consent, I often think about like consent forms that we need to fill out about how services use our data or what the GP does with our medical notes, for example. But let's get real here. We never enter relationships asking the other person to sign a document that they will respect us and that they will love us and support us. We just expect that to happen. The same goes for sex. Our young people are not signing forms to agree to have sex with another person. So how do we actually define it when that idea of consent really is so complex? Well, I want to show you this clip now. So some of you might have seen it before. It's called the cup of tea consent video, and it's a really nice, easy way to help our young people understand consent. This clip in particular does relate to sexual consent. However, the basic premise of it could be used for anything really, just to really highlight what consent is.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please. That's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, "But you wanted tea last week." Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, "But you wanted tea last night." If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
So, quite a gentle clip there to introduce that idea of consent to your teenagers. They might know about it already, they might have seen it at school, but you could show them the clip just to gather their thoughts on it afterwards. Just type into YouTube cup of tea consent clean and it will come up. Just a word of warning, if you don't put the word clean, you'll get some swearing. You might be fine with this, but just giving you the heads up. So I'm going to move us on now to body image. Let's have a think about body image and all of the insecurities that our young people could be facing. I'm sure that we all have our own insecurities here tonight. And if I asked you to think about those or list them, they would come to your head straight away. But again, I'm going to take you back to being a teenager, to that time when you started puberty and your hips might have widened, you might have got a bit hairier, developed some acne maybe, and you're generally feeling a bit bigger and everything is feeling quite new. So despite body image struggles being prevalent for most people, we need to acknowledge how this can really be amplified for teenagers. Stretch marks, body hair or lack of, size of muscles, breast size, acne, wearing glasses, size of belly, shape or size of nose, hairstyle, freckles, size of bum, length of legs, skin tone, smile, height, weight, birthmarks, scars, and I'm sure there are plenty more we could add to the list. So where do these insecurities come from? So if we were speaking about these 15 or 20 years ago, we might have said models in magazines. Magazines that we would pick up from Tesco once a week or once a fortnight perhaps. However, thinking about our young people today, we know that young people are now exposed to unrealistic beauty standards on a daily basis. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, now known as X, Facebook, Snapchat, the list goes on and on. In fact, recently 40% of young people said that images that they saw on social media caused them to feel worried about their body image. Not only are young people exposed on the daily to the perfect body type by having easy access to the social media of celebrities and models, they also have access to influencers. I'm sure that a lot of us tonight have heard our young people talk about influencers or social media stars. But just in case anyone hasn't, so influencers are people who use their social media platforms as part of their job to create content and ultimately to advertise products. They're often that bit more accessible to our young people as they're not quite in that celebrity category, but more of your everyday person who has that really kind of large following. Now, don't get us wrong here, influencers can be great. Some of them spread very positive messages, some of them are activists, some of them contribute very well to society. However, we must also acknowledge that most of them will conform to this perfect body type and have high beauty standards. On top of this, influencers, models, celebrities, and now regular people are not only using filters, but they're using editing apps or AI to totally change the way that they look online. Now, I'm sure that most of us here tonight will have used a filter to make us feel a bit better about ourselves when uploading a photo. I know that I certainly have. But what we're really talking about here is people using editing software to totally change their face or body, which is totally unrealistic, like the photos that we have on screen now. We also know that there are other areas that can affect our young people's body image, like feeling that they're not attractive enough, for example, feeling as though their body shape is not accurately represented in the media, maybe struggling to find clothes for their body, for example, if they have a physical disability, comments made by friends or peers, adverts, even health campaigns or lessons at school on what a healthy body is. What we're trying to get at here is that everyone has insecurities, of course they do, but now more than ever, there is an awful lot of added pressure on our young people to feel that they need to look a really particular type of way in order to be accepted. Relationships with our bodies are incredibly complex. And then adding in the past kind of 5 years or so of this influx of extreme editing or surgery, for example, or fillers becoming the norm, is really clear why our young people may struggle with their body image. We will talk more about the rise of AI later in our sessions, but I want to show you a clip now which just shows quite how easily someone's whole appearance can be changed as a result of editing software such as Photoshop.
Very quiet, please. Camera's rolling. And we're recording sound. It's
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that video gave us a bit of an insight just to how much can be edited. I'm going to hand over to Emma now, who's going to speak to you a little bit about core messages to young boys.
Thanks, Chloe. It's really scary, isn't it? All those Photoshop edits, and with AI now, it's getting even harder for our young people and for us to realise what is real and what is not, the things that we see online. So we're going to talk a little bit now about the additional challenges that our young boys can be facing, and we're going to delve into toxic masculinity a little bit. It's something that has really become quite mainstream recently. All of the topics we've spoken tonight about so far, we really could spend a whole session focusing on. But this one is quite worrying because it's quite a tricky one to summarise. It's been a hot topic, hasn't it, recently, through shows such as Adolescent and the recent Louis Theroux documentary, The Manosphere. If you haven't watched either of these, we definitely recommend you give them a go. But the manosphere really is a collection of online forums, blogs, and influencers like the ones Chloe's just talked about. But they particularly target young boys and men. So our children, and they target them with a particular, often extreme ideology of what masculinity is. And the core message is designed to appeal to adolescent boys, those normal teenage boys who are experiencing challenges such as insecurity, loneliness, or a lack of direction. And what they do is they promise these boys a guaranteed formula for success, for power, and for confidence. And these messages are delivered by influencers in flash cars, surrounded by beautiful girls, in massive, expensive houses, often in places like Dubai. They're wearing nice clothes, they've got perfect gym bodies, so they're the ideal alpha male. And they're selling this lifestyle to young boys. And we'll talk about algorithms a bit more next week, but your average teenage boy looking at a sports site is never many clicks away from these influencers. Ask your sons and daughters about some of the people they may follow. When we delivered this session a few years ago, Andrew Tate was the only one that we really knew about, but now there are so many more like him. So you may hear names such as HS Tiki Aidan Ross, Jordan Peterson, or Sneeko. And these are men all pushing similar narratives. Generally, our boys and young men are critical, they're savvy, and they're resilient online users. But these negative gendered narratives are seeping more and more into mainstream platforms and conversations. And we don't want to alarm you, but this is something that you really need to be aware of so that you can push back. So these influencers mainly are pushing some of the ideas that are on your screen now. So they talk about something called the red pill awakening. They claim to reveal the hidden truth that society is rigged against men and controlled by women. So they urge young boys and men to take the red pill, to join their groups and to see reality. Sorry, bear with me just one. Sorry, I couldn't get rid of that. Then they talk about dominance as masculinity. So the manosphere really defines male worth through wealth, through physical appearance, and that dominance over women. It tells us that true masculinity is built on controlling women and for men refusing to be subservient to women. And some schools are reporting seeing this behaviour through boys refusing to take direction from female teachers. And then they blame women for their personal struggles. So influencers are often portraying men as victims of modern feminism, and they are blaming women for that young man's lack of romantic success or for their personal and financial failures. It's women's fault. We also see that suppression of emotion. So any vulnerability is framed as a weakness. So they're pushing boys to hide their feelings and to avoid seeking mental health support. But we know that this ultimately does harm to our men and boys. This type of masculinity is often linked with suicide, and sadly we know that currently around 75% of all suicides are men. And then they talk about this self-improvement and hustle culture. So many influencers will use topics like fitness and finance and crypto to lure the boys in, promising financial independence as a method to achieving this high social status. And most of them offer opportunities to invest or gamble money with them. So what can you as parents and carers do to push back against this? Because you can't possibly understand every meme, every acronym, every emoji and every platform that's going on. But it is important to be actively engaged in how our young men and boys are navigating this online world. Because research shows that a positive relationship between parental engagement and young people's willingness to talk about negative online experiences. So like we were saying about sex, the more you keep the door open for discussions with your young people, the more likely they are to share appropriately with you. Because this research has found that 95% of young people who said their parents regularly encourage open conversations about online safety would speak to their families if something online made them feel upset, uncomfortable and ashamed. We would strongly advise you to take an interest in what your children are doing online. Ask them who they're following. See if you can watch with them and encourage them to question and critically assess the online content. We're going to talk about it lots over our sessions, but talk early and often about respectful relationships, including consent that Chloe's just talked about, and encourage those positive role models in your children's offline lives. And really importantly, try and reassure boys and young men that seeking help and talking about mental health is a sign of strength. Some of this toxic masculinity is no one's fault. We're all born with a bit of bias. You know, research has even shown us that people treat a baby bump differently if they know that it's a boy compared to a girl. People really do tend to be more rougher with a boy bump and more gentle with a girl. And this stuff is really unconscious and has developed over the years. But we know that these norms of how we treat boys and girls differently impacts our young people. You know, phrases like "don't be a wimp to a boy" will really go on to impact the rest of their lives. How they seek help in the future relies on how we teach them to seek help in the future. We all know that statistics around men going to the doctors are far less than women, and it really impacts on how our young boys see themselves and how they see women and girls. So education and information is key. Please try and watch the Louis Theroux documentary if you can bear it, and have a look at some of the online content that is readily available to your young people. Remember, lots of this is nothing new, but there's plenty that you can do to combat it. So we just want to show you a clip now that is quite long. It's about 10 minutes, and it involves a man talking about toxic masculinity and his awareness of how he treats or has treated his son and daughter differently. It's a bit of an emotive and difficult clip to watch. It does discuss rape. So if you feel this might be difficult for you, please do mute us and come back in about 11 minutes time. Have yourselves a cup of tea, look after yourselves, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes time.
So I grew up in New York City, between Harlem and the Bronx. Growing up as a boy, we was taught that men had to be tough, had to be strong, had to be courageous, dominating, no pain, no emotions, with the exception of anger and definitely no fear. That men are in charge, which means women are not. That men lead, and you should just follow and just do what we say. That men are superior, women are inferior. That men are strong, women are weak. That women are of less value, property of men, and objects, particularly sexual objects. I've later come to know that to be the collective socialization of men, better known as the man box. See, this man box has in it all the ingredients of how we define what it means to be a man. Now, I also want to say, without a doubt, there are some wonderful, wonderful, absolutely wonderful things about being a man. Well, at the same time, there's some stuff that's just straight up twisted. And we really need to begin to challenge, look at it, and really get in the process of deconstructing, redefining what we come to know as manhood. This is my two at home, Kendall and Jade. They're 11 and 12. Kendall's 15 months older than Jade. There's a period of time, when my wife, her name is Tammy, and we just got real busy and whip, bit, bam, boom, Kendall and Jade. Right? And when they were about 5 and 6, 4 and 5, Jade could come to me. It didn't matter, come to me crying, It didn't matter what she was crying about. She can get on my knees, she can snot my sleeve up, just cry it out. Daddy got you, that's all that's important. Now Kendall, on the other hand, and like I said, he's only 15 months older than her, he come to me crying. It's like soon as I would hear him crying, a clock would go off. I would give the boy probably about 30 seconds, which means by the time he got to me, I was already saying things like, why you crying? Hold your head up, look at me, explain to me what's wrong, tell me what's wrong, I can't understand you while you're crying. And out of my own frustration of my role and responsibility of building him up as a man to fit into these guidelines and these structures that are defining this man box, I would find myself saying things like, just go in your room. Just go on in your room, sit down, get yourself together, and come back and talk to me when you could talk to me like a what? Like a man. And he's 5 years old. And as I grow in life, I would say to myself, my God, what's wrong with me? What am I doing? Why would I do this? And I think back to my father. There was a time in my life where we had a very troubled experience in our family. My brother Henry, he died tragically when we was teenagers. We lived in New York City, as I said, we lived in the Bronx at the time. And the burial was a place called Long Island. It was about 2 hours outside of the city. And as we were preparing to come back from the burial, the cars stopped at the bathroom, to let folks take care of themselves before the long ride back to the city. And the limousine empties out. My mother, my sister, my auntie, they all get out, but my father and I stayed in the limousine. And no sooner than the women got out, he burst out crying. He didn't want to cry in front of me, but he knew he wasn't going to make it back to the city. It was better me than to allow himself to express these feelings and emotions in front of the women. And this is a man who 10 minutes ago had just put his teenage son in the ground. Something I just can't even imagine. The thing that sticks with me the most is that he was apologizing to me for crying in front of me. And at the same time, he was also giving me props, lifting me up for not crying. You know, I come to also look at this as this fear that we have as men, this fear that just have us paralyzed, holding us hostage to this man box. I can remember speaking to a 12-year-old boy, a football player, and I asked him, I said, how would you feel if in front of all the players, your coach told you you were playing like a girl? Now, I expected him to say something like, I'll be sad, I'll be mad, I'll be angry, or something like that. No, the boy said to me, it would destroy me. And I said to myself, God, if it would destroy him to be called a girl, what are we then teaching him about girls? It took me back to a time when I was about 12 years old. I grew up in tenement buildings, you know, in the inner city. And at this time, we're living in the Bronx. And in the building next to where I lived, there was a guy named Johnny. He was about 16 years old, and we were all about 12 years old, younger guys. And he was hanging out with all us younger guys. And this guy, he was up to a lot of no good. And he was the kind of kid where parents would have to wonder, what is this 16-year-old boy doing with these 12-year-old boys? And he did spend a lot of time up to no good. He was a troubled kid. You know, his mother had died from a heroin overdose. He was being raised by his grandmother. His father wasn't on the set. His grandmother had 2 jobs. He was home alone a lot. But I gotta tell you, we young guys, we looked up to this dude, man. He was cool. He was fine. That's what his sister said. He was fine, right? He was having sex. You know, we all looked up to him. So one day I'm out in front of the house doing something, just playing around, doing something, I don't know what. He looks out his window, he calls me upstairs. He said, hey, Amp, they called me Anthony growing up as a kid. Hey, Anthony, come on upstairs. Johnny called, you go. So I run right upstairs. As he opens the door, he says to me, do you want some? Now, I immediately knew what he meant, because for me growing up at that time and our relationship with this man box, do you want some meant one or two things, sex or drugs. And we weren't doing drugs. Now, my box, my card, my man box card was immediately in jeopardy. 2 things. One, I never had sex. We don't talk about that as men. You only tell your dearest, closest friends sworn to secrecy for life the first time you had sex. For everybody else, we go around like we've been having sex since we was 2. There ain't no first time. The other thing I couldn't tell him is that I didn't want any. You know, that's even worse. We're supposed to always be on the prowl. Women are objects, especially sexual objects. So anyway, I couldn't tell him any of that. So like my mother would say, make a long story short, I just simply said to Johnny, yes. He told me go in his room. I go in his room, on his bed is a girl from the neighborhood named Sheila. She's 16 years old, she's nude. She is what I know today to be mentally ill, higher functioning at times than others. We had a whole choice worth, you know, inappropriate names for her. Anyway, Johnny had just gotten through having sex with her. Well, he actually raped her, but he would say he had sex with her because while Sheila never said no, she also never said yes. So he was offering me the opportunity to do the same. So when I go in the room, I close the door. Folks, I'm petrified. I stand with my back to the door so Johnny can't bust in the room and see that I'm not doing anything. And I stand there long enough that I could have actually done something. So now I'm no longer trying to figure out what I'm gonna do. I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna get out of this room. So in my 12 years of wisdom, I zip my pants down, I walk out into the living room, and lo and behold to me, while I was in the room with Sheila, Johnny was back at the window calling guys up. So now it's a living room full of guys, like, you know, like the waiting room in the doctor's office. And they asked me, how was it? And I say to them, it was good. And I zip my pants up in front of them, and I head for the door. Now, I say this all with remorse, and I was feeling a tremendous amount of remorse at that time, but I was conflicting, because while I was feeling remorse, I was excited, because I didn't get caught, but I knew I felt bad about what was happening. This fear of getting outside the man box totally enveloped me. It was way more important to me about me and my man box card than about Sheila and what was happening to her. See, collectively, we as men are taught to have less value in women, to view them as property and the objects of men. We see that as an equation that equals violence against women. We as men, good men, the large majority of men, We operate on the foundation of this whole collective socialization. We kind of see ourselves separate, but we're very much a part of it. You see, we have to come to understand that less value, property, and objectification is the foundation, and the violence can't happen without it. So we're very much a part of the solution as well as the problem. The Centers for Disease Control says that men's violence against women is at epidemic proportions. It's the #1 health concern for women in this country and abroad. So quickly, I'd like to just say, this is my love of my life, my daughter Jade. The world I envision for her. How do I want men to be acting and behaving? I need you on board. I need you with me. I need you working with me and me working with you on how we raise our sons and teach them to be men. That it's okay to not be dominating. That it's okay to have feelings and emotions. That it's okay to promote equality. That it's okay to have women who are just friends and that's it. That it's okay to be whole. That my liberation as a man is tied to your liberation as a woman. I remember asking a 9-year-old boy, what would life be like for you if you didn't have to adhere to this man box? He said to me, I would be free. Thank you, folks.
Great, thank you. That is a really hard-hitting video to watch, isn't it? So I do hope that you're all okay after that. Some of it's really tough to hear. I'm going to take you back to some of the absolute basics now from that. So any of you who have done any kind of psychology work or looked at your teenagers' homework is going to recognise this pyramid as being based on Maslow's hierarchy of need. So Abraham Maslow proposed this theory way back in 1943, but it's still as relevant today as it was back then. So the idea is basically that the needs lower down the pyramid must be satisfied before individuals can attend to the needs higher up. So if a young person's basic needs are not being met, they're going to have little or no opportunity to reach their potential. And there's a lot of evidence about why children living in poverty don't do very well in school. And actually looking at this, it's obvious, isn't it? If they're really worried about where their next meal is going to be or where they're going to sleep tonight, how are they going to focus on a maths project? So if we're thinking about our children, I just want to take us back to the very basic bottom line of this pyramid and look at food, water, warmth, and rest. So this is the absolute basics before anything else. So before you send your teenager out into the big world every morning, is breakfast available? Is their bed and their duvet clean and comfortable? And this is where nurture plays a really huge part in all of this. The little tiny things really can make such a huge difference. Most teenagers live in their bedrooms in an absolute state, I know. But really simple things like making their bed for them in the morning or opening a window is going to make them feel much better. There are times when you might not want to do this. They made that mess, let them live in it. But we all know that feeling of getting into a clean, warm bed when you've had a rough day. And our children need this feeling too. And believe it or not, your teenagers still want to spend time with you. Yeah, of course, they're on their phone, their laptop, they're playing games and they're talking to their friends, they're watching YouTube, they're eating snacks and convincing you that they're doing their homework, but they're still looking at you for guidance. So maybe role model things like having water with you, taking time out to do things that you like, making your bed in the morning. And many families have found that shared meals have become a luxury, really, that we've lost. Sitting around the dining table, if you have one, every night as a family can seem sometimes like something out of a movie or an old storybook. And some of the reason of that is just the pace of life, isn't it? You and your children have so many competing demands. It's really hard to find an hour each evening when you can all be together. So maybe just take that pressure off a little bit. Try and eat once a week as a family. It's going to have a huge impact. Try and find one night a week and commit to it. Ask a different member of the family each week to plan the meal, get them to do the shopping, lay the table, help with the preparation. It's that shared responsibility. Your family's a team. It isn't always just down to you. TikTok's full of great recipe ideas that your teenager might want to share with you. But even 3 or 4 different microwave meals on the sofa, eaten at the same time, is something. because the real positive side effect of sharing family meals together is that it allows everyone to feel valued and appreciated, which is a real core need for teenagers. You know, you've managed to find an hour to give them, and that emotional warmth is something that we really need. And rest. We saw from the brain slide right at the beginning tonight that teenagers need sleep. So our advice is to let them sleep, unless there is a real need for them to be out of bed in the morning, like school or going to a job. Let them sleep, because you and them will feel so much better for it. And then we want to leave you with a few final messages as we start to wind tonight up, that young people going through that process of adolescence need what they've always needed from you. They want your love, your support, your encouragement, your nurture, your acceptance, and your attention. And the difference for teenagers is that while younger children need us to be in the lead, pulling them along, directing their steps and making all those decisions, teenagers need us to be by their side. We need to give them the chance to stride out in front, but be there to still take the reins and lead when necessary. They still want to be noticed by you. Too often, because teenagers are being moody and they withdraw into themselves, we respond by ignoring them. You know, if they're rude to us, we swap rooms, don't we? And we ignore them. Ignoring bad behaviour and not rising to it is one thing, but ignoring the person who is annoying us is another thing. And then it becomes a pattern where they mope, so we ignore them, so they mope more, and they convince them that we don't care. So we want to leave you tonight with those 4 basic guidelines, really, to have a think about. So one is always make sure they know that you love them and you're proud of them. You really cannot tell them this enough. They need to hear it. Even when things are busy or stressful and it feels like you're in survival mode, a word or a hug can reassure them a huge amount. Praise them for what they do well and encourage them to look for new things. They might shrug you off or look embarrassed, but still tell them you love them. Be honest about your feelings, because you don't have to be perfect. We all get things wrong and we shout or we say unkind things. If this happens, just say sorry and explain why it happened, because then your young person is going to learn from you that it's okay to make mistakes and it doesn't make anyone a bad person. And if you're struggling with something, let them see this. Let them see how you work through it to find a solution. It's about being human. You don't have to be perfect. But do be clear about what is not acceptable in your house, and tell them why. The rules are different in everybody's house. And teenagers need to know what is okay and what is not, and what will happen if they cross that line. And follow through on those consequences if they do cross the line, because otherwise they'll get confused and they'll stop respecting those boundaries. You're in charge and people feel safe with rules and expectations. You know, imagine being in a new unfamiliar building and not knowing where to go or what to do, with no signposting and no one explaining anything to you. It makes you feel very unsafe. And when our teenagers aren't sure what those boundaries are, that's how they feel. And always remember to own your own role. You know, you are the parent here. Don't be afraid to make tough decisions. If your child sees that you fear them or their reaction and always give in to them, it's going to make them feel very powerful, which can be frightening for everybody. Young people need to know that you are there to keep to the rules and keep them safe. So we're almost coming to the end. We've got another clip to show you and a few more things to say, but it would be great if when we finished, you could just talk to your teenager about where you've been tonight and what you've listened to. If you can give your prickly teenager a hug, ask them first, see if they will let you, because that 20-second hug really does release something called oxytocin, which not only creates a really strong bond between the huggers, but it will boost your and their immune systems. It increases happiness, it reduces blood pressure, and reduces stress, all from a 20-second hug. Offer them a hug, hold on for the 20 seconds. It's good for you and it's good for them. Tell them why you're doing it. So just before Chloe closes tonight, we want to show you, it's a really old comedy sketch about our lovely children turning into teenagers. It is a bit of an old sketchy clip, but we haven't found a better example. So yeah, it's just about 2.5 minutes long. Enjoy.
Only 30 seconds to go before I'm 13, 29, 28, 27. Boing. Can I have some more ice cream, Mum?
Kevin, you've eaten all the ice cream in the house, remember?
Oh, yeah. Bloody hell, I'm thick, Mr. Bean. Oh, no. Oh, no. 15, 14, 13. Up against Super Mario Kart. Boom, bam, bam, boom, bam, bam, boom, bam, bam. I don't have to go to bed tonight, do I?
Yes, in 5 minutes. Remember, you've still got school tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Brian. Yeah! I'm 13!
Happy birthday, Kevin.
Happy birthday to me! Happy birthday to me! Happy birthday, Dick! Go! Go!
Kevin?
Are you all right?
Darling, he's losing the power of rational thought.
With the use of his arms.
He's become a teenager.
Kevin!
What?
It's your birthday, Kevin.
I know!
Happy birthday, Kevin!
Okay, stop going on about it, will you? Why isn't there bloody ice cream?
Oh, come on, Kevin. You've eaten 5 tubs on your own this evening, remember?
So unfair, I hate you!
Kevin, don't speak to your mum and I like that.
What? I didn't say anything! What?
No, Kevin, that is for the morning.
I can't do anything anymore!
Oh, well, seeing as you've started, at least it'll cheer him up.
Well, you said you wanted Super Mario Kart.
I hate Super Mario, it's sad! I want a bloody high five!
Right, that's it, off to bed.
I am not going to bed, I'm going out!
Oh, don't be so stupid, Kevin. You can't go out now.
Why not?
Because it's 12 o'clock, it's way past your bedtime, it's pouring with rain outside, it's dangerous for a child on his own, you've got nowhere to go, and you've got school tomorrow.
That is so unfair, I hate you! All right then, I will go to bed, okay? Happy?
Good night, Kevin.
Don't bloody shout at me!
Don't worry, darling. It's only a phase. It'll only last for 4 or 5 years.
So just a light-hearted clip there to finish us off for tonight. But just before we come to the end of tonight's session, we just want to leave you with a little bit of signposting to a few services. We will be giving you more detailed information at the end of week 3. Information searching is where the internet is a really good thing here. We don't want to bombard you with information, especially as things change so quickly. The main ones to support you further with things we've looked at tonight are on your screen now. We appreciate not everyone here is from Devon, so there is some generic information on the Parent Talk and the NSPCC. Space run the youth services in Devon and are always happy to talk to parents, and Fear Free have lots of useful toolkits and safety information that you can download on their website. Finally, Pinpoint Devon